So hello, everyone. My name is Brianne Fisher. Um, I put my name in the chat and I see a lot of you did as well. And it's so great to see so many different folks on this call today. We're very excited about what is being shared and presented. And we are really looking forward to a good conversation in regards to how community-based organizations are thinking about this work and how we can, we as the government sector can work with community-based partnerships, community-based organizations for successful partnerships that bring in much needed resources to our region. So like I said, for Brianne Fisher, I'm with the City of Tempe. I am the Climate Action Manager, and I've been helping Anne from Sustainable Cities Network in kind of facilitating these climate resilient Maricopa workshops. These workshops are structured in a way to really take advantage of the opportunity that the federal funding is providing us. We see such a wonderful opportunity to capitalize on the federal funding, to create a organizational structure and to create some momentum around regional collaboration. We know a lot of the issues and challenges that we face will be better dealt with, better addressed, better overcome with multi-sector, multi-jurisdictional approaches. And so really that's what we're trying to get at the heart of here, and using the federal funding as an opportunity to showcase what that looks like. We have had regional collaboration before in Maricopa County, and we want to do that again going forward, specifically for climate resilient infrastructure. So if you have not yet, if you're just joining, please continue to put your name and title in the chat. We have a couple of polls throughout the presentation and workshop, so please do not hesitate to share your thoughts there and also in the chat going forward. So again, just a little bit about what we are doing here today. And the Regional Resilience Maricopa Exchange is, like I said, just a collaborative effort to try to get everybody in the room to think about what the opportunities are for collective action and collective investment. We do see this model taking shape in other regions, and these regions are really going to be the competitive ones when it comes to federal funding that we are interested in getting as well. So, San Diego, for those of you who've been on previous workshop calls, we've heard from San Diego. Annapolis is also creating a regional resilience authority, and that's taking shape. So we do see models across the nation of what this could look like, what this collective organization effort could look like, and we're seeing that they're very fruitful. And so this is just the beginnings. We know this work takes time. We know regional collaboration is a slow process, but we are striving towards some action this summer and this year, and striving towards putting together some grant proposals that we can prove to ourselves and prove to other funders that we can act as a region. And so today specifically, we are hearing from our community-based organizations. We know that successful grant proposals will require several things: regional collaboration. They will also require showcasing partnerships with community-based organizations and really bringing in that equity lens. And we know that workforce and labor is also another component that can create a successful grant. And so as we're going through these workshops and as we're trying to think about what projects what kind of grant proposals we might go forward with. Keeping those three things in mind have been a priority for us. And specifically today, we're touching on the community-based partnerships. And we have a couple of great people here locally who have good examples of that. But first, I think it's always good to hear what other regions and states are doing. And so we have a video from the city of Ann Arbor to show a little bit about what kind of community-based partnerships are taking place in different areas. So I'm going to get that pulled up, and again, continue to put your name and title in the chat. And thank you all for being here.
Buddy, my name is Missy Stoltz. I'm the Sustainability and Innovations Manager here at the Decarbonization Project, and we don't actually call it that in the neighborhood, so I'll tell you more about it in a second. But it is my absolute and unequivocal pleasure to tell you a little bit about that project here in just a second. So with that being said, I am going to share my screen here and walk you through a little bit about what we got going on. 1 second. These fun things. All right, here we go. So assuming you can see this, I'm just going to turn off my camera here and let's get started. So Brian is a neighborhood in Ann Arbor, Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I sit. And I'm just going to go through a bunch of slides really, really fast to tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing in the neighborhood. And all of this work is centered around A20, which is our community's climate and equity plan. And A20 is about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as an entire community. So I mean, the University of Michigan, the city of Ann Arbor, all of our residents, all of our businesses to zero by 2030. And we've mapped out a number of ways that we can do that. And that's what's in A20. It's a living carbon neutrality plan. It's of course wrong the instant that you write it, but it's directionally right. And we know that buildings are a large source of emissions. In fact, they're about 67% of our community's emissions come from our built environment and how we operate it, with 20% coming from our residential building stock. So in A20, while we have 44 actions, the things we actually have high fidelity to are these 7 strategies. There are things like powering our electric grid with 100% renewable energy, supporting beneficial electrification, and reducing, of course, energy waste reduction, reducing the miles we travel in our vehicles by 50%, moving towards a circular economy, enhancing the resilience of our people in our place because of course climate change is already here, and then cross-cutting measures which belong in every single category, things like our equity work, our metrics, our community engagement. So this is what we actually have a high fidelity towards. The actions, while we're working on them, those most likely will change, right? Technology will change, political will change, funding resources will change, so we know there's a shift. We also know that focusing just on climate change is a little bit incomplete when you think about this work. We all know the intersection of climate change and health. And so we really wanted to ask a lot of questions around how can our work as local governments really impact the physical and mental well-being of our residents? And also, how does it negatively influence the well-being of our residents? Recognizing that impacts that we can influence indoor and outdoor really do cascade through the system, whether that's what we're doing around green infrastructure, whether that's what we're regulating and how we're regulating. And of course, many of us know during the pandemic, we spent a lot more time indoors breathing in some pretty toxic So let me pivot to the Bryant neighborhood project and bring some of this home. We talk a lot within the network around the importance of frontline communities and really centering our work in equity and justice. And frontline communities, just the way that we're sort of thinking about that, right? These are the communities that experience the impacts of climate change or anything generally, first and worst. And for our approach, we want to make sure that they get climate benefits first and most. Now, often frontline communities are communities of color, they're low-income folk, people with disabilities, the elderly, marginalized groups like LGBTQ, transgender youth, et cetera. And so we really wanted to think about where do we have kind of frontline communities, and that took us to Bryant. Bryant is Ann Arbor's last naturally occurring affordable housing neighborhood. So over 50% people of color, 75% low income. The average energy cost for residents is $1,300 to $1,800. And when you're low income, we're talking about a third of the residents be classified as energy burdened, and like 15% being extremely energy burdened, meaning they're spending something like 15 to 20% of their income to heat and cool the built environment as they live. Obviously grossly unsustainable. Also within this neighborhood is Bryant Community Center, which you see a picture of here. It's run by Community Action Network, which is a community agency, a CBO, that does a whole bunch of different services. And Bryant in particular is really, really strong with youth programming, helping keep kids in school, provide after school care, tutoring, summer programs, and they're nestled right in the neighborhood. They're actually 2 houses were merged together within this neighborhood, which is composed of 262 houses. There's a lot of leadership within the community. We have a council member that's there. We have a public school board member that's there. And that's not why we picked it at all. But we do have a lot of like natural leadership and advocacy. And all of the homes were built by the same developer in the same 18-month span. And there's only 2 styles of houses. So as you think about scalability and transferability, there's a lot of comparability, right, in the individual houses. So it allows us to kind of assess certain houses and be able to make conclusions about the building stock that are likely true. Things like roofs need replacement. Well, likely a lot of roofs need replacement once we get a percentage of how many of our sample size. That'll come into greater focus in a second. So in looking at this neighborhood and the work with the residents, we made the decision that we wanted to strive to create the first fully decarbonized existing neighborhood in America. We do say the Midwest just to give ourselves a little get out of jail free card, but we think in the US. And of course, you know, like we hear about decarbonized neighborhoods, they're all new builds, right? Because it's super easy to think about, well, nothing is easy in our work, but it's easier to think about how to do this in a new build. It's really complicated to do this in existing infrastructure in an existing neighborhood and uber complicated in a low income neighborhood, right? The market doesn't serve most of the folks in this neighborhood. So we made this audacious goal. We started working with residents to vision what that would look like. And we've been working for about 18 months, and we're lucky that we got some Ignite Foundation planning grants to really pay for residents' time to engage with folks, to hire someone from the community. Crystal's joined our team. She lives in the neighborhood. She's now a paid engagement specialist to help talk to residents about what it would look like to bring this vision to fruition. And we're actively fundraising to make the improvements now that people have identified. And I'm just going to walk through some of the things that we're thinking about. One, building electrification is really important. We know that on-site combustion has really significant health impacts. And in Michigan, it's pretty acute, right? Literally our cooktop that many of us have a relationship with, we're cooking on our stove frequently, is producing indoor air quality that in many cases is killing us. And so we wanted to find a way that we could support from a health perspective the transition to electrification and really beneficial electrification where it makes sense. We also know that, of course, from a climate perspective, that anytime we're using gas, there's leaks along that entire pipeline, and these fugitive emissions are really significant. They're much more significant than we thought at first. So anything that we can do to lessen the amount of gas that we use is not just about indoor air quality and reducing the pull on the consumer at the end of the line, which is also very important, but it's about reducing the emissions that emit throughout the entire production, storage, transmission, distribution phase, as well as the operational phase. And I mentioned this before, I won't belabor this. I'll make all these slides available. RMI has done some really great research into this, looking at air quality impacts in our homes. The one that always sticks with me is just that gas stove combusting on site. You can have indoor air quality that's 50 to 400 times more noxious than what's legally allowable outdoors. That is bonkers and a really safety health hazard that we have to address. And it's not equal, right? Developing bodies, those who are vulnerable, immunocompromised individuals experience these impacts much more severely than those of us with more robust immune systems. So we want to support beneficial electrification, right? But we also need to do energy waste reduction because we want to make sure that we're lowering the demand that people have on electric. In some parts of the country, electricity is cheaper to operate than natural gas. Not here. In Michigan, we have in Ann Arbor, in our service territory for our utility, we have the highest electric rates in the Midwest. So the idea of just transitioning someone to electric, that's not going to solve this problem. It's actually going to increase energy burden because electric rates are so high. So we know that we have to do energy efficiency work. It's also really important for things like cold climate air source heat pumps to make sure that you have a really nice, tight envelope so that the experience that you have is far more comfortable with that new piece of equipment. So we have started to look at how do we take that more traditional energy audit or assessment tool and apply that in the neighborhood. But it wouldn't be enough if we just did that. We also have to do electrification, right? As I mentioned before, for lots of reasons, and to decarbonize. And so we took that energy assessment and we worked with residents to identify the opportunities to electrify. And we actually added beneficial electrification into the energy audit assessment. And we know that we have to do on-site renewable energy generation, because we've got to power our grid with 100% renewable energy and our utility is not moving fast enough. And so that assessment also includes a look at what kind of solar potential households have, as well as the operating cost. That is combined into this A20 assessment that we apply. And we won grant funding, and we're now doing an A20 assessment looking at energy efficiency, beneficial electrification, renewable energy, and on-site energy storage, as well as a few other things that the residents specifically put in, like radon monitoring and assessment, of course, flood vulnerability. Those are all being assessed as part of this A20 assessment. And the grant funding we received was to do this assessment, 30 of them in person with a traditional energy auditor. And we've hired auditors of color to come in, so they're more representative of the residents themselves and just support workforce development within the industry. But we also developed a virtual audit, which allows people to be guided through this experience with someone over a laptop. And we bring them the device, we bring them all the monitoring equipment, we train them on how to use it. And this became really important during the pandemic. So we're using it now for many folks in the neighborhood are particularly vulnerable. And so we want to make sure that they're safe in their experience. And some folks don't want people in their homes right now. And so this is a way that we're able to conduct that assessment. They take pictures, we guide them through it, we're live with them on the phone. And we're doing that assessment 120 homes. So we're going to have an incredible sample size, almost, over 50% of the households will receive an energy assessment. And then all of that data is going to be integrated into understanding what kinds of improvements are needed to create this decarbonized neighborhood. We're out fundraising for this. We put in a grant, $2 million grant to fully decarbonize 30 of the homes based on what we've learned. We also have a climate ballot, a climate village on the ballot in November, which who knows which way the winds will blow on this, but should it pass, would include dollars to actually direct buy some of the equipment that's going to be necessary to help this neighborhood and others throughout the city make this transition. And we're also exploring something called a sustainable energy utility, which is a conversation for another day, but it's a supplemental utility that would be a municipal utility, but it would supplement what our incumbent investor-owned utility does by only focusing on generation. So we would dispatch solar and storage throughout the system owned by the public, and that's how we would help scale some of this work. So that's just a little bit about what's going on. I'm going to buzz through this just to let you know, we're also working on outdoor air quality. We are installing, these are just background information to kind of justify. We don't have air quality monitors that are publicly owned. So we bought our first two. One is in Bryant, one's in our downtown. We're buying many, many more, but we want to understand what are the disparate impacts that we have from an outdoor air quality perspective, and how effective are the measures that we're implementing in actually improving air quality. And then just talking about ecosystem goals, this neighborhood floods. If you look at the geography and the history of this neighborhood, it is abutting the city's landfill. It's right between a highway. It is underinvested. It floods all of the time. It doesn't have high tree canopy coverage. It's like the lowest coverage you can possibly imagine. It just checks all the boxes. And so we have a trees initiative where we're helping plant and maintain trees. And we've really centered this neighborhood because residents also have asked for this, and they've asked for fruit-bearing trees in particular. And so we've been fundraising and finding resources and volunteers to help plant as many trees as we can and help care for those trees in the neighborhood. Excuse me. And this includes in one of the parks, we're actually doing a food forest. So we've been able to secure some resources, and the residents have helped us design what that food forest will look like so that they can actually just walk through and grab a pear or a peach or a walnut or whatever feels right for them. And then because this neighborhood floods, we actually took the entire Office of Sustainability and Innovation staff through a master rain gardener training so that we could volunteer to help install rain gardens and maintain rain gardens in the neighborhood as part of our trust building. Residents have asked for this, and we want to show up and respond to what they're asking for. So I think that's the core tenet that I want to leave you with, is that this project is driven by residents, their desires, their vision, their needs, their capacity, and we just step up and show up in the way that they want us to. It's the hardest project I've ever worked on. It's multidimensional, super dynamic, and it's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. So the last thing we're doing in the neighborhood is working on a resilience center. Hopefully in a few weeks, I'll be able to tell you that we've successfully done this. But Bryant Community Center, it provides food distribution. It's the largest food distribution source we have in the entire county. It does after school programming for youth in the neighborhood. It is just a trusted rock, primarily for families, caregivers, and youth. And we need it to be able to operate every single day. So there's no point in trying to program this space because it's already beautifully programmed, but there is a need to make sure it can always maintain and operate. And so we are looking to install a bunch of solar and battery storage to help maintain at least the freezers and the fridges that are critical for food distribution. And it looks like I might have just found some money. So fingers, toes, eyes, ears, legs crossed, that manifests itself. So that's just a little bit about what we got going on at Bryant. This is one of many, many projects as part of our A20 initiative. And if you're curious, that's our mayor standing next to a mural that we have in one of our parks, but I'm pretty confident that individual looks like George Washington, but it's meant to be our ubiquitous Ann Arborite, enjoying a beautiful horizon of a carbon neutral future that's equitable and just for all. So thanks so much for listening. I hope it was somewhat interesting, and I hope the rest of your conversation goes well. And as always, thanks for inspiring me. I'll talk to you later.
So I hope that was an exciting, inspiring video. Just a couple of thoughts. Yes, Shelley, definitely a comprehensive climate program. The goal of decarbonizing a neighborhood, you can see from that video, is complicated, right? I think the biggest standout to me is, they did these assessments where they could pinpoint exactly how to make it decarbonized efficiently. However, they had to do a couple of other things. For instance, tree giveaways and installing rain gardens to build trust with the community to actually do the work that hits on more of the decarbonization. And I just think that that's an incredible point in her video to us. We all know that there's an efficient way to get things done and to reach our goals, but in order to actually partner with the community, it looks a little bit different than what would be maybe the most efficient, maybe the most cost-effective way to get something done. And so figuring out and discovering with the community what those pieces are, what the elements are to build trust to actually get that work done is what I think we want to think about and focus on going forward with some of these grant proposals. And I think some of you all know Lisa on this call. She's new to the city of Scottsdale, and we're very excited to have her, and wanted to give her a little bit of time to talk about some of her work from Baltimore. So Lisa, let me get this slide ready for you.
Yeah, so hi everybody. Sorry I was a little late. I'm bummed that I missed the first part of the video from Ann Arbor, but it's recorded, so I'll listen to this. So as Breon said, I've been here in Scottsdale for a little over 3 months, and before that I spent 5 years in Baltimore. And I think one of the signature programs from the Office of Sustainability there was what they did on community resiliency hubs. In Baltimore, they always approached these as being partnerships with community organizations. There was never, none of these are city-owned or sort of city-owned buildings or structures, but instead they went with sort of trusted service-based organizations that had strong leadership presence in some of the underserved neighborhoods that were already providing essential resources and community support, and then worked with them to increase that support during crises. And so it started 5 or 6 years ago with a handful of organizations that were known to the office, and started as a partnership with the Office of Sustainability, the Department of Health, and Emergency Management. So just a small side note, Baltimore City is actually an independent city, so we actually serve as a city and a county. So the city has its own health department and emergency management team. And so it was a three-way agency outreach, but the Office of Sustainability had the lead on getting some of the initial grant funding. It had a little bit of a slow start. We had some staff turnover and, took some time to really kind of talk to the community members and understand kind of what these hubs could be. And I think, I took a few minutes. Aubrey Gurm, who's the climate resilience planner there, is, if you want follow-up, she's probably the person to talk to. But just a few thoughts on why I think this hub program has grown to the 15 organizations that it is now. So we didn't start from the perfect. None of the hubs had battery and solar storage from the beginning, which I think is oftentimes what people think is the starting point for a hub. Baltimore viewed the starting point as that relationship between the organization and their community, and then what the city could do to support that. I think the city made sure that what they did was useful for the organizations. We started by finding grant money and continued to do that, whether it was a large grant to provide some initial supplies, or whether it was smaller grants that sometimes Aubrey even just pulled together an application for. They listened to the groups in terms of what they wanted, and so we had trainings. So we got money from the Pew Charitable Trust for some trainings. Started working with the organizations kind of as a cohort, having regular meetings. Aubrey will tell you that one of the things that she always follows through when there are requests, when there are questions, that's a priority for her to do that. And I think the program also worked to always remain flexible and open to change. And so just a few examples of how that kind of played out. Early on, we realized that the community's definition of sort of emergency was different than ours. We had come at it from FEMA all-hazard mitigation planning, and their definition was often much more in line with either kind of local events, or just that more sense that there are just ongoing stressors that are at an emergency level in some of those communities, whether it's crime or concentrated poverty or other aspects that they felt like they were responding to. On kind of a more detailed basis, I think during the pandemic, and some of these photos that you're seeing here are from the hubs during the pandemic. It's getting water delivered for extreme heat days, it's food distributions, it's fan giveaways. The health department had gotten fans, and the resiliency hubs ended up giving out like 20% of them in their neighborhoods. But the health department called up and said, we'd like to use one of the resiliency hubs for this one day to give out shots. And the hub said, no, we'll only do it if you come back on a regular basis. You've just got to show up regularly, and that's how we'll increase vaccination and testing in our neighborhoods. And the health department changed how they did that. That influenced the fact that they did it for that hub. They did it in other places too, as a way to kind of slowly chip away at the lack of trust, but also to provide a service for people who can't just always, may not always be able to make it on that one day. And I think the one other thing that I thought was really interesting when the time I left, is that the resiliency hubs were being consulted as the city was pulling together an evacuation plan, which again, I think is a sign of how much the city had come to rely on the hubs, but also the extent to which the hubs, I think, trusted not just the original agencies that were working with them, but now Department of Transportation that was doing this evacuation plan. So just wanted to share a few thoughts. I think in Scottsdale, we're hoping that we can do something similar at our one of our senior centers, the Vista del Camino. And we're actually, again, it's an organization, it's a city building, but it's really providing a lot of those services. I think we're going to try to add battery and solar, but I think we're going to hopefully be able to call them a resiliency hub even before that. So thanks, and hope I didn't take up too much time.
No, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I think the idea of resilience hubs, to your point, you think immediately or of the battery storage, the solar powered, and Braden said it well in the chat, you know, we do oftentimes need that social infrastructure to get set up in order to do the physical infrastructure components, that is, you know, what people actually think of when they think of a resilience hub or they think of climate action. They want to see the physical things in place, but we know, I think both on the government side and community-based organization side, that it is the relationship building, the trust building that needs to take place and takes time to layer in that work, in order to see success in that next step of the physical infrastructure. And so I know a lot of you have some experience with community-based organizations, or if you are a community-based organization and you've partnered with a government entity, we would love to do a little bit of a poll. We're curious of what experience is out there, what other examples are out there that we could kind of look at for future work. So we have a poll, and we'd love to hear from you. And just for those that are working and not looking at the chat, Lisa did say that several of the hubs do now have solar and battery storage, as a result of the fundraising. And, you know, that makes sense. You know, you start to build relationships with the community, and some of the grants and that elevator pitch starts to tell itself, right? The more buy-in you have from the different sectors, the different organizations, the easier it is to be successful in fundraising and applying for grants. So thank you all for taking the time to do that. And we also appreciate Emma and Masavi, who are here today, who have been doing a lot of work in the community, trying to gather community-based organizations to come up with some principles that will help guide future partnerships and future collaborations. And so I just want to briefly mention that Emma's from Unlimited Potential and Masavi from CHISPA Arizona have been leading this charge, and the remainder of this workshop is going to be hearing from them, and is so grateful for their work and for them being willing to share their work with us for our feedback. You know, as they work with the community and work with community-based organizations, this is kind of one way to ground truth what they're hearing with other folks. So please do not hesitate to ask questions in the chat. We'll be doing another poll afterwards to just kind of make sure what we hear is resonating, but please feel free to use the chat as well. And with that, Emma, Masavi.
Thank you, Bren. Hello, good morning, buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. Masavi Perea with CHISPA Arizona. And Emma and I, we are very happy to be here and to have this conversation. The first part, I'm going to be talking about the community-based organization, and then Emma is going to be talking about the second part, also about the guidelines. So a little bit of myself. Again, Masavi Perea, I'm the organizing director for CHISPA Arizona. I have been working for CHISPA Arizona in several positions, but mostly on the organizing part. Before that, I used to be a labor organizer for over 14 years with different construction trades. Actually, I'm a construction worker by trade, and I have been learning organizing through the years. So, and because of that, I have been able to connect with many community groups, right, in many capacities. So this community-based organization work has been kind of natural and also organic through the conversations between Emma and myself and other groups. So can you please go to the first slide? Thank you. So as you all know, right, I don't want to preach the choir here, right? But I mean, most of the community-based organizations are trying to survive, right? Many of these groups, they have like a battle in order to bring funds, right, to themselves. Oh, let me time myself. And that is always a battle, right? Because community groups, they always want to survive. And also something that we want to acknowledge, right? That the diversity that makes us stronger, right? So all these groups that we have on this list, those are groups that we have been talking to. And also there are many other groups that we have been talking to. And we can see a beautiful diversity in different fields. Like there are groups that are focusing in parks and civic engagement, health issues, access to health, education, access to education. So we have different type of environmentalists, people who focus on environmental justice, groups who focus on clean energy, on accessibility. We have groups that they focus on immigrants, on food justice, on healthy food, also with a shelter community. So all these groups, there is always an intersectionality, right? So, and that's normally the question, right? Where we can work together. Well, I think the short answer for that is in the community. And what it means, the community, right? It means the neighborhood, but also it means the community members. 6 years ago, when I did start working for CHISPA, and I started talking with other community groups about also like embracing environmental justice, right? I remember other group, they used to tell me, but we are very busy working on these other issues, right? And then I remember that my narrative back then was like, hey, I'm with you. Like we need union jobs. We need stop the police brutality. We need better education. We need better access to health, but we need to have a better environment as well. We need to stop the heat islands effect. We need to stop the contamination. We need to have better parks, right? Because all you members from your organizations are affected by this as well. And that was a good entrance into the community groups. So, and after that, after continue meeting with the groups and now again, right, trying to create this coalition. Normally one of the reasons why community groups are not able to connect in this type of partnership is very simple. Is because they are busy. Right, and we all are busy, and that's good, right? Like you wanna find leaders who are busy, right? If you find someone who's not doing much, so probably it's not a good sign, right? So, but also again to reconnect that all these priorities connect us, and also another common factor that we have with most of the organizers of people who work and do work on this type of organization is their passion, right? They do this because they believe on it. And sometimes their passion focusing only in their target, right? And they lose the opportunity to work as a coalitions, right? And bringing more power and more synergy into these groups, right? And also something else that I have learned is that sometimes when we start working in these issues, we think that we are the only ones and the first one doing this type of work, right? And there is no need to reinvent the wheel. There are many other groups who have been working like way before us. Actually, there are many groups who have paved the path where we are. And normally when I'm trying to create a training or a conversation, I normally check other groups, right? Like there are two favorite groups that I work a lot and that I get motivated by. One is indigenous communities, and the other one is the Black community, that they have been here before, way before me, and they have creating many partnerships, groups, right? But also what they have taught me is that I cannot come to a space and say that I'm here to fix issues, right? I'm here to learn, right? I'm here to be patient. I'm here to be humble and for reals to support, right? And the way that I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna listen to them, to their fights. I'm gonna learn from their mistakes, but also I'm gonna celebrate and learn from their victories, right? So that's the community groups. And also, like, another factor is that many community groups, they don't want to work with government entities. And there are many reasons why, right? Mistrust, timelines, grants, politics, you know. So something that I'm very happy about this community, about this partnership that we are working is that exactly that we are trying to be on the all of us on the same page, right? Can we go please to the next slide? So in order to be on the same page, we need to work on the guiding principles. So what does that mean, right? Like, what it is important for me probably is not important for someone else. But I think one of the requirements is going to be to understand what the other community groups are working for and why is their priority. And how, if we get something productive, we all are going to be benefit, right? So I think here that the biggest challenge is going to be for government entities, that they can be humble, but mostly vulnerable, right? So that they are willing to listen and they are willing to work in a very different way, right? There is no secret, right, that everyone has a timeline, everyone has an agenda, right? But we need to be willing to listen. We need to be willing to be working in a very different way. And these are one of the guiding principles that our community have said that we want to do it, right? Absolutely, we want to be inclusive. We want to have a language justice, and not only in English, in Spanish, right? As we know, there are many other big communities out there, Vietnamese communities, indigenous communities, refugees communities, right? So we want to have diversity, but also we want to have that this partnership will be led by BIPOC community, right? Black, indigenous, and people of color, right? We want to have collaborations. We want to be accountable in our times. If we say that we are going to do this, we need to do that, right? We need to be very innovative, right? But also something very important, we need to have an open door. Like, we always need to be asking, who are we missing on these conversations? And why, if we are missing these communities, why we haven't approached them? And also we need to ask ourselves why they are not trusting us, right? And I think that's going to be a big challenge for that. And also, right, I mean, going back a little bit to the funding, you know, in most of the grants, in most of the projects, normally most of the grants, most of the funds are going to research, right? But there are a few occasions where the funds are coming to community organizations, that they are going to spend time talking with people, right? Like going to the neighborhood, including them in the conversations. I think that is something that has been missing. And I think continue working on the guiding principles, right? I think that can be like the next step, where we can tell the other community groups, I hear you, I see you, right? And I'm willing to work with you, but also I'm willing to find a balance, right? How my issues are important to your members, and your issues are also important to my members. So it is a part of education, right? So I'm gonna pass it to my co-worker on this amazing project, Emma Viera, who's gonna be talking a little bit also about the guiding principles, but also about the the mini grants opportunities. Emma?
Sure. Actually, let me go back and talk a little bit about what we have been doing from since we started in this process. As Masabi mentioned, we have been in conversations. Presently is 38 different community-based organizations, some who are in this conversation here today. And it's through that process, and we have had 3 hybrid meetings so far. And through that process, to that conversation with each of the organizations and as a group, we all realize that what we have been doing as of now, yes, it has an impact, no doubt, but it's not enough. And we are ready to make that change, to work in a larger scale and to work in a more cohesive approach to have a better impact. And as Masabi mentioned, there have been some historical problems in the past. But again, is that focus of we need something more, and we are ready for that something more. So therefore, we have developed the guiding principles, and the organizations, as Masabi mentioned, is represented in many different areas. We have health, we have advocacy, climate and environment, and social services, and many others within those categories. However, some of them, even though we may have been working together, but in reality, we tend to work in our own approach. Now, the idea of us working together as a group, it does bring some fears, it brings some a little bit of uncomfortable, just because we haven't done it in the past. But at the same time, it's such an amazing potential, is such an amazing opportunity, and we're ready. However, we do need some ground rules for that, and being inclusive and open to be inclusive is extremely important for us, and being able to everyone have a voice, and really focusing on that innovation component, because we know that what we have been doing so far can be improved, should be improved, but it's looking at that long term and looking at what are the consequences, what are the repercussions, so we don't make the same mistakes that we have done in the past. And it is through that collaboration, to those conversations that we can make, that we can really bring the different ideas and the different results that we could have to these projects. And yes, we are all accountable for our work at all levels. So these guiding principles is about us working together as community-based organizations, but also how we want to work with the different government institutions, and how we want to be engaged at the conversation. And another extremely important is that equity component, where everyone is respected, and we focus, we bring that component to communities, organizations, areas, neighborhoods that have been left behind for whatever reason. Everyone needs to be represented at the table, and is looking at that totality of the community. one of the areas that we will be experimenting is with the mini grants. And the mini grants are intended for the region of Maricopa County. And then how we, organizations that may not have been working together in the past, how do we collaborate in making this demonstration project where we identified what could be a problem within the electric vehicle, and then a solution that we bring to that, as well as a deliverable that will be accomplished by December 31st. So this is really an opportunity for us as a community-based organizations, for us at this table here today, working with government institutions or city, towns, tribes, areas, that we work between with a group, as well as in an area that we may not have worked in the past, but that it will serve as the first step, as the foundation for later on bigger conversations, higher impact. So again, it's a new territory for all of us, but we are excited and more than willing to move forward. Does anyone has a question? Is there any questions?
Thanks, Emma. Just quickly, just to give everybody a little bit more context for this work, you know, we have some funding from the Vitalis Foundation to be doing this regional resilience work. This Maricopa Resilient Exchange is the result of some of that funding. And as a result of that funding, we felt that there was a couple of different capacity building streams that we needed to work on. One was government capacity building. So working with the city of Scottsdale, Phoenix, Avondale, all of these cities working together in a collaborative way on resilient infrastructure. What are our priorities? What do we have in the queue already? Another component of this capacity building was needed for community-based organizations, and more specifically, how cities or how the county works with community-based organizations. What we want to avoid is individual cities or the county applying for federal funding without quality community-based organization partnerships, or none at all. So we at the city applied for the Vitalis funding. We've been working with a consultant to help kind of frame some of these workshops and build the capacity. And then we've contracted with Emma and Masavi to do this larger regional community-based organization collaboration and work, and starting the process and laying the foundation of gathering the principles. So just wanted to provide a little bit of that context for why we are here today, and why Emma and Masavi are doing the work that they are doing. And it looks like we have one question. How did the process look like until you reached those guiding principles?
Sure. We, again, first, it was one-on-one conversations with organizations and inviting them, gathering their interest in being in this process. And many times is making the link between the organizations, because again, it's a very diverse group of organizations that some are all public health focused, or some are advocacy focused. Therefore, bringing them together, having the conversations with them, having that, making the link in how one area relates to the other, and how everything is affecting our environment, our situation, and showing or having the conversation in how us working together in this process, how we can improve and develop that foundation in how we're going to work in other projects, in other areas. And once we had those individuals conversations, we brought them together to a meeting. We have had 3 meetings so far. And then from there, the conversations of developing the guiding principles. And they are reviewed in every meeting, and everyone is, as new organizations come, we review them again and making sure that it's still applicable for today. I hope that answered your question. Then as it relates to MAG has been, and that's Brianna and Braden can talk a little bit more about that, but MAG has been very involved in the process of the government component.
And just to Braden's point and add to the conversation a little is, these guiding principles are definitely in draft form. So we plan on kind of going out to other folks, other entities, and gathering feedback, garnering conversation about it. But also the mini grants in themselves will be test trials of putting these principles into practice. What does that actually look like when there's a project being conducted?
No, I'm actually super excited with the idea of the mini grants, because it's truly an opportunity to develop that foundation, that comfort level of us working intentionally in one project or one or more projects, and practicing that collaboration that we mentioned. It was so important, and that and being inclusive in the process.
So,
Brianne, I think Danae has something to share, because Danae's work that she did with CHISPA and Masavi is kind of one of the local projects that gave us this idea to do the mini grant work, as well as the work that City of Tempe did with Unlimited Potential. But I think maybe hearing Danae's story might even further elucidate why these guiding principles are so important, and why the mini grants could be so helpful. So Danae, do you want to come in? And then, then after that, we'll clarify. These mini grants will be, CBOs will apply and they'll choose what city to work with. So we're flipping the script on purpose. We're, one, because that's what needs to happen, and 2, because philanthropy is starting to do that, where the money is going to come to CBOs, and the CBOs are going to choose whether or not to include cities, instead of cities having all the power and choosing whether or not to choose CBOs. So that flipping the script is happening nationally, and we want to, but it hasn't happened in Arizona. So we want this to be an opportunity of practicing this new model in Arizona before bigger grants and bigger opportunities come. So before we get into the details of that, Danae, I'd love to give you the floor.
So I'll just preface this by saying that Masavi and CHISPA's webinars are like the only one I still get really excited for, because they know how to do like Zoom like nobody else does. And so it starts with music, people are laughing and dancing. And And then like it brings a lot of heart to it. And so I have seen Masavi and his team work magic to really bring people together in a time that was really difficult, right? It was the pandemic, very virtual, and they busted out some amazing innovations to make it really feel like a community when we were so separated. And so so I had seen Masavi do this actually with the city of Phoenix, this kind of bilingual virtual workshop. And I wanted to bring that opportunity to Avondale. So I reached out and Masavi was like instantly on board. And it was fun. I got to take him out on kind of a tour of the Avondale community so he could learn a little bit more about some of the local treasures that we have and just get a feel for it. And then he and I facilitated a bilingual workshop. And one of the things I want to share about this is you never quite know where you're going to, where a conversation might lead. And so in this case, there was a teacher who was attending our workshop, and she was also a member of CHISPA. And so you talk about that connection there. And she wanted to engage her students in some sort of sustainability work, give them some exposure to quote unquote real world experiences. And so after the workshop finished up, her and I connected, this teacher and I connected, and she works for a school in Avondale and she does a lot of STEM work. And so that whole workshop catalyzed this really big, we did a sustainability day for 400 students at West Point High School, where we focused on some of our challenges, our local challenges, and asked students to help us identify solutions. One of those was where to plant trees. And we were having them help us think through where trees were needed most, looking at some of the heat maps, looking at some tree equity data, but also just, I mean, they live in the community. So their own intuition, where do we need these? And the students at that high school identified that there was another high school in Avondale that really needed these trees because it was a very hot area. So we got that school involved. We got Arizona Sustainability Alliance involved. We got APS involved. They donated the trees. And we had this huge mashup of all these organizations come together to plant these trees in that school that the other students had identified. And it was this really awesome example of how the snowball effect, like if you just pull on one string, there's so many other strings that it's attached to. And sometimes it can have this really beautiful outcome. So I want to thank Masabi for being there from the very beginning on that project.
It's a great example of that community-based partnership, and Danae, to your point, what it could lead to, right, is just starting the conversation. And so I think it might be fair to ask Emma or Masabi to be willing to have conversations with anybody who might be interested in a mini grant, and can talk through some of what they're thinking of, and just start the conversation and see where it could go.
Bria, may I say, this is Violta, may I say something?
Absolutely.
Just share with the group. But we're talking about mini projects and mini grants. I just wanted to share, since 2019, we do have a small kind of grant. It's a grant from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And as a result, and what is great about this grant is that this is a collaboration between national, kind of at national level. We do have Columbia University involved, public health, and also American Council for Energy Efficient Economy. So during in September of this year, this project ends. But as a result, the purpose was to, the overarching goal of this project is to change culture of health in our vulnerable communities. So we created, it was established energy insecurity work group, and we have been meeting monthly and so on, and discussing and learning more about energy insecurity, energy burden in our community. We worked closely, we still work with Unlimited Potential, and also with in Central Phoenix with Salud and Balance, and in mobile home communities. So anyway, I just want to mention that there has been an opportunity for some mini grants from the program that we were involved, you know, in Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And those mini grants on behalf of these two communities, we did kind of write them, and of course talk to the community-based organizations, what the projects are about, what do we need, and those grants, they came. For example, just to give you an example, the survey was completed for energy insecurity. So we got around 12,000 for less than a year. The other one, the cool project that happened, and we worked with Emma's team, community health workers were involved, and those were, we did, it was a project about training health workers to become experts on climate and health. And also we wanted to include energy insecurity there, you know, knowledge about energy insecurity and things like that. So then later on, we got another grant, which somebody mentioned, like a snowball. You always are part of that, you know, and you bring, so we got later on another mini grant that helped about dissemination of the conversation that will be in these community groups or focus groups, and what kind of materials, flyers we need to prepare, and so on. Later, being part of that national kind of group, there is a change, there is an opportunity of another climate, it's community change leadership program. And we just applied, thinking about the work group development, workforce development, actually, for weatherization programs, because we find out there is a need for the homes to be weatherized in these communities. And we also find out that staff in the programs like City of Phoenix and other cities, they don't lack staff, and also contractors, they don't have staff. So we thought would be a great idea to develop the workforce by recruiting people from the vulnerable communities, training them, put them through training, and so on. So these have been many projects that they came as a result of this. So I think there is a great opportunity. It has been really a good work to be done. And I am glad to hear that also through Vitalist, only these little projects that they can make some changes in the community.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. What great work and what a needed space to be working in. I think that if anybody on this call is involved in that work, or any government entities that see an opportunity to partner in that work, let's get connected for sure. It's great that our public health organizations have done good work in working with community-based organizations in the past before. That's a good model to go after, and it's a good legacy to have in here in Arizona. Okay, so it sounds like there's a couple of folks who want to see a couple of the slides in. So let me get some things pulled up here. Okay, there was asked to show this slide again with the different categories. And Emma, just for clarification, is the ask that we want mini grants to be in these spaces?
Yes, in the electric vehicle heat relief. And obviously those, I think that the most important is the process itself, that we develop a good understanding in how these working together and working with governmental entities is developed. Like what works well, then we can continue and foster that. What didn't work, then we can improve, we can change and improve to have then other conversations. But that it is related to these categories, and that is within the region. So those are the most important. And obviously we understand the total amount is 20,000, but with that is, we're not planning to change climate with 20,000 in Maricopa County, but I think is really good amount to develop the process in how we work together.
Great explanation of what we're trying to do here. And again, I know it's not as clear to see on this slide, but the little bubbles attached to these larger bubbles are just some of the community-based organizations that we do know are working in this space, and just a visual representation of that. Happy to send this PowerPoint with the poll question results in the slides out to everybody who registered today. And then just to help answer the poll questions, I'm going to go back to the guiding principles slide.
Brianne, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So this is Lisa. So I love that the mini grants are set up so that it's the community groups that respond. And I apologize if I missed this, but I'm assuming then that the funds go to the community-based organization. And I just wanted to clarify that, because I know sometimes groups are so small that that level of capacity to even manage a small grant, can be a burden. And so just wanted to make sure that's the idea, or whether or not when they partner with the city, is the city kind of then the fiscal agent for the funding.
Emma, it looks like you are willing to address the question.
Yeah, no, the funding will go to the community-based organization.
Perfect.
And then if there is any, if the city is requesting funding, then that's a separate conversation, but the funding will be for the community-based organization to lead the project.
And then Emma, I assume like if a community-based organization is so small that they don't have their 501c3, then Unlimited Potential could disperse the funds to the things they need. That's one of the great things about having you run it, is that you're an NGO that could distribute funds as if the organization isn't big enough to take on its own funds.
Of course, we can be the fiscal, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to, yes.
Well, and to piggyback on that, are there any reporting requirements for the CBO that would receive funds?
Coming back to this group and sharing, and sharing with the group that Emma has been meeting with. Emma, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, of course, because part of it is identifying what works well and what didn't work. So certainly we do want to have, yeah, we need an accountability. That is one of the principles. We need to make sure that if the funding, let's say the funding was for bring groups together in a community and talk about Earth Day, then when was the meeting? How many participants? What were the end results of the meeting? Yes, we do need accountability. We do need a report of it.
Great. So I'll let's give maybe another 3 to 4 minutes for everybody to finish the poll. And if there's more questions, feel free to enter them in chat and we can get them addressed.
Can I address the question? There is a question about if would it be helpful for CBOs to have a list of contacts for information for cities, towns, and counties? Yes, definitely. And we certainly have this group that is related. So just having that inclusive list and who is willing, wanting to participate in the mini grants, that will be very helpful.
Yeah, I could see that, because I was thinking, like, if there's a CBO that has maybe wanted to work with a community and sees this mini grant as an opportunity, like, what's their point of entry? And I'm thinking maybe there would be opportunity to share some of the contact lists that Sustainable Cities Network has, because I think that would be a nice entry point for a lot of these CBOs.
Sure, yeah.
And in terms of what are the minimum requires for the CBO? Honestly, if you are interested in wanting to participate and really get involved in the process, that's the most important. It's not about the size. It's not about, we are intentionally looking for individuals, for organizations that have not worked together before with others. So it's not about the size or how organized you are or what are your policies and procedures. It's about you wanting to work in this area and go to the next step. And yes, please reach back. Let me know. We will include you in the meetings. We'll have that one-on-one conversation. And really the conversation is to explain how is these efforts are related to a bigger vision and how this is just the first step in what is to come for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, because hopefully we will develop a good foundation in how we work together. We don't have flyers or website, but certainly we will be able to share information. We do want to open the mini grants soon in order to make it feasible for individuals to end by December 31st. So we will be sending what are the guidance for the mini grants.
Okay, I think let's give 1 more minute so everybody can wrap up their poll questions. Just a little reminder or some context to those who've not been on these workshop calls before. It does seem like we are moving down the path of these 3 funding buckets: EVs, ecosystem restoration, healthy streets. It's looking like these are funding buckets from the federal government that the region could be exploring proposals to. I just have a couple of community-based organizations that have been doing work in this space in each of these buckets. We know that there's more. We know that there's more interested. But just giving you all a little bit of a preview, if you know of something, know of an organization doing work in this space, please let us know. We're building this network. And again, specifically, if there's any mini grants that can be done in this work. Excited to hear and explore those. And just generally some next steps. We are planning to do some work in those 3 buckets over the summer. So putting our brains together, gathering with community-based organizations, coming up with an outline of what a proposal could be. We'll also be identifying and getting started the mini grants. And then later in the fall, we will continue to have these workshops, exploring the work that we're currently doing with the proposals and continuing to talk about what regional collaboration within climate and within resiliency infrastructure can look like and be going forward. Does anybody have any other final questions or thoughts? Okay, seeing none. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to email me or Anne. We can get them to the right folks. Emma and Masavi will always be there to be helpful in some of the mini grant conversations. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being interested in the opportunity to collaborate. We feel very excited with the work that Emma and Masavi are doing and are so grateful for them, and all of the other community-based organizations that are interested in partnering and interested in getting voices in our community elevated and funding to those areas. So we look forward to continued conversations. So thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for all the inspiration and great work, everyone.